our bodies worked in sync with what nature is doing. And so our blueprint of our biology is set up in that context. That shifted us away from realizing how connected we are to nature. Our blueprint, this sort of idea, is that our cells, genetics, all these are in the context of the greater picture, which is what nature is doing all the time is life and living and health. And how do we stimulate or go back to tapping into that blueprint? It actually, when we have dis-ease or when we're sick, it's not always, but sometimes a sign that we're living farther away from that blueprint or what our body needs to maintain health.
Welcome to the TBD Fit Podcast on Doctor Talks. I'm your host, Daniel Kile, and I will be guiding you through this wellness journey in terms of optimizing health and longevity, where we unpack the science, the do's, the don'ts, and everything in between. Come join us. Look forward to seeing you inside.
Today we have an incredible guest, Dr. Michael Blahut. We just had probably a 30-minute conversation prior to this call on all things wellness and retreat and just feeling better in the right environment. So Dr. Blahut is a board-certified osteopathic family physician and integrative functional medicine doctor, providing telemedicine and osteopathic care across the U.S. through his holistic family healthcare practice. He's also the author of Everyday Medicine, Ancient Secrets to Awaken Your Innate Healing Abilities. A very interesting read, which we're going to dive into. It's going to be the main focus of our conversation today, where he provides practical guidance and blends ancient wisdom with modern science into simple daily practices for restoring energy and whole body health. He currently resides with his family in beautiful Costa Rica, which we were speaking about early offline, which I hope to come visit him very soon. Dr. Blahut, welcome to the show.
All right, Dr. Dan, thank you for having me, man. I really appreciate the work you do and the opportunity to speak about some of these health practices and ideas of how to maintain our health and wellness.
Yes,
in the world that
the
we live
modern
in.
world, where I always suggest is incongruent with our evolutionary biology, but not about that yet, or maybe it is.
Yeah.
Let's dive in with you. What is your backstory? I love opening up with guests kind of depict how they got into what they're doing now. What was the catalyst?
Yeah. Well, there's quite a number of things, but for myself, when I actually have an undergraduate degree in environmental science, so I worked in environmental conservation, coral reef conservation. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in the Fiji Islands for 2 years and a couple months, and what I saw there was that how much our people are connected to the environment and how much our health is affecting us if we treat the environment poorly, if we pollute or put chemicals out in the air, how many people got sick. And so then I started to rethink my attention should be on people. I love working on people, working with people. And so I moved from Fiji. After there, I went to LA and I got into doing yoga and shiatsu. I got trained as a shiatsu practitioner. I studied Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, all these different alternative practices. And I actually met my wife, who's from Italy. I know we spoke about that there at a yoga training. And I learned from her and from this experience. She had an autoimmune disease. She was really struggling back in Italy. And so, what I managed to learn from her experience is that changing her environment, changing simple practices in her health really shifted, and her autoimmune disease went away. And so then it's got me thinking, like, wow, how powerful are these things that maybe people forgot about or that are less emphasized? And I was working with a chiropractor at the time, and he said, have you heard about osteopathic medicine? And I said, no, what is that? And so he introduced me to a really amazing osteopath and other doctors that were medical doctors. And I got opened up to this path about osteopathic medicine and how I can also have the tools and the credentials and the ability to work with people's health, doing some alternative things, but open enough that people kind of see you as a resource. And so that inspired me on this journey. So I kind of came from this field. Actually, I was outside of medicine and even going to school for over 10 years before I went back to school into medical school. And so I was learning all these different alternative, interesting health ideas, and then went to medicine, then did family medicine as a specialty out in LA and go through all the, training and certifications, and then realizing I need to bring these two worlds together. And so it was mostly just this sort of eye-opening experiences of just living out in nature, being with people in Fiji, and then seeing the transformation that my wife went through in her
That's
own
so
health journey.
crazy given what we've been discussing offline because the number one place in the world that I always wanted to visit, Fiji.
Oh yeah. There you go. So we have these connections, and this is an amazing, you know, amazing world that we live in, that we're attracting each other to learn from each other, and our experiences like really are kind of, to me, where we learn and grow is from life and the journey of life. And this is pointing also in our health journey, because for me, when the times that I felt sick or wasn't feeling good, I knew I probably wasn't on the right path, or I was forcing something that maybe didn't need to be forced. And that's kind of hits on like a topic that I really find is important too for people's health, is to understand that we have, like, how important it is to have a purpose, a connection, and sort of a structure set up that what we do feels inspiring to us, because then our biology and our bodies respond to that emotion, that connection in our sort of consciousness, that we're enjoying something, that we're, maybe it's a struggle, like going through medical school was a struggle for me. It was not easy, but I knew that I had a sense that I really wanted to do it and learn something, and that was able to provide me this sort of force to get through and do what I'm doing today. So it's so amazing just to see those connections and
Two principles
synchronicities
I want
that
to
happen.
underscore there because the first thing, the openness to receive, right? Where our attention goes, our energy flows, but what kind of energy are we emitting and what kind of energy are we attracting? And it's so
Yep.
interesting when you said that because when you're open to receive, the body provides everything, the world provides everything for you, and the body will respond in kind. And so that synergy, when you said that, is just remarkable. If I'm not mistaken, in Fiji, I think unique
Yeah.
to any other nation, it has three national languages.
Yes. Yeah, Fiji has English because it was colonized up by the British. Then the British brought in a bunch of Indians from India because they were using them as indentured servants, let's say, and they were growing all the farms, the sugar cane, the products that were being shipped back to Europe, and then the native Fijians. So the native Fijians came up with a contract with the, basically the colonialists at that time, British, that they wouldn't be forced to work for them or do anything differently, and they could live on their land. So we have Fijian native language, and all the tribes, they have their sub dialects, Indian and English. And it was such an amazing, interesting mix of culture there that it's, I don't know where else in the world you see something like that, but I'm
So the
sure
second
it's
principle that I wanted to
fascinating.
underscore was purpose, which you just referenced, and that's a question we ask within our
Purpose.
intake. And second to Fiji, I've always wanted to visit Japan. I have immense reverence for that culture, and they identify with the word as ikigai,
Okay.
or the reason for existence, the reason why you wake up every morning. And when we ask our patients or
Right.
anyone in general, most of us are like living lost souls. We don't have a purpose, or we don't identify with um,
Right.
why kind of what we do or what drives us, or again the reason why we wake up every morning to get out of bed. And so it's interesting that you share that because in terms of connection, right, connection can really drive purpose in many respects, and we're unfortunately in our more kind of
Right.
globally connected society, we're less connected in many realms. But I can appreciate how you have now blended both Eastern and Western medicine to really accelerate healing. I want to highlight the term when you said alternative, because to me, it's doing a disservice, I think, to what we do. What we practice is restorative medicine. We're allowing the body to heal as whether intelligent design or however kind of we were put together, uh, but our innate wisdom to help heal.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate the wisdom that you provided in your book, and I want to definitely get into that here. But what you've done to blend both practices, I think, is the epitome of what modern medicine should look like.
Mm.
And and so I don't want to undermine what
Right.
when you use the
Yeah.
word alternative, but I hear it all the time because, especially in the U.S. and if you're in Costa Rica, maybe it's
Yeah.
similar. But when you practice alternative or holistic medicine, you're kind of like, well, you're, I don't want to say quack, but sometimes, okay, show me the proof. What about, taking a pill or everything? We're talking offline about that.
Right.
And when you said to force something, I think that's what we're trying to do by shoving more prescriptions, right? This is changing the environment so that now it's
Right.
conducive to healing, or energy is medicine, frequency is medicine, right?
Yeah.
And allowing the environment to dictate a shift in physiology. And so let's start perhaps with your book. You
Yeah.
introduced the term original biological blueprint of health. Can you define that?
Well, it's similar to what you're saying right there. It's just our kind of remembering what our biology is meant to be stimulated by. And so, if you can imagine ourselves without technology going back even like a couple hundred years, that our bodies worked in sync with what nature is doing. And so, our blueprint to of our biology is set up in that context, because if we think about technology just went exponential in the last 50 to 100 years, but I would say for sure in the last 50 years, and that shifted us away from realizing how connected we are to nature. And our blueprint, this sort of idea, is that our cells, genetics, all these are in the context of the greater picture, which is what nature is doing all the time is life and living and health. And how do we stimulate or go back to tapping into that blueprint? It actually, when we have dis-ease or when we're sick, it's not always, but sometimes a sign that we're living farther away from that blueprint or what our body needs to maintain health. And the idea is for me to look at these concepts of how is our body designed in the sort of environmental, natural world of things, and start to fuel it back to that, which is, like I state in my book, I have these 5 zones of health, which are very simplistic, but the idea is that these are critical categories we can intervene on or remember or bring back to our bodies to turn on the information in our biology that, oh, I can heal, or I know how to heal. I just need to be given these resources. And let me give you an example. Like, one really big one is light. How we relate to light is a big signal of information to our body of how safe we are, what environment we're in, and what we should be doing. Because in every moment, our body is doing something different. It's either healing or understanding. We have the circadian rhythm, which we talked about before, but the circadian rhythm is tapped into the rhythm of the planet, the rise of the sun, the setting of the sun, even to seasonality of when we're in winter and we're in summer. And we need different things during those different times. And why our body knows that is because of the light that hits our eyes and our skin. And so, a way that we can tap into this sort of original biological blueprint, that's, as I say, but there's a ton of words for this, just turning on our innate healing abilities, is have a better relationship to light, sunlight, and artificial light, and realizing what kind of shifts us out of health or out of balance, and what shifts us more into health and balance. And that kind of coincides with this remembering or tapping back into these principles, from breathing to hearing nature sounds, water flowing, to taking walks in nature, to being able to have human to human connections and even connections with animals in nature. Those are all part of our biology that gives us signals that that we're in the healing mode, and that's what we call the parasympathetic, or the rest and digest and heal mode. And the more we're able to tap into that in our nervous system, the more our body is resilient and can heal
I
when we need it
love that
to
you
heal.
started with light because that's where I wanted to go first. So, in your book, you
Oh, sweet.
elegantly
Yeah.
indicate here that whole body exposure to UV light reduces elevated blood pressure by as much as 40 points, lowering blood sugar levels in people with diabetes, decreasing inflammation or inflammatory cholesterol, increasing white blood cells, particularly lymphocytes. All that playing obviously a huge role in immune regulation.
Right.
And when I look at aging, or now this whole pursuit of anti-aging, which I'm diametrically opposed to. That's always contextual, but
Yeah.
it's immune system dysregulation, which obviously heightens the inflammatory burden, which is the root of all chronic disease. And something as free as light and so ubiquitous, the teaching now is we need to avoid it. Light
Right.
is damaging. People are developing allergies, quote unquote, to light.
Right.
And I find that it is inconsistent with our biology. We need light to survive, just like any plants do, right? Just like all mammals do, all animals, everything on this.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
so If you're allergic to
Right.
light, the
Yes,
component here is that because
100%.
you're toxic, it's amplifying the toxicity inside of you. Your oxidative burden
Right.
is extremely high, and you're not able to buffer against that.
Super.
So, in terms of light,
Yeah.
you discuss here, which was interesting, green versus red, I believe, and looking at
Yeah, green light, red light. Yeah, there's different types of frequencies of light that stimulate us from different processes. And if you can imagine this by, if we go out for a walk in the forest and you're in a lot of trees, the reflected light that we see is going to be more green light. And that light actually is stimulating our bodies to have a remembering of certain frequencies or energy or information. It's all the same of what our bodies should be doing. So we do see you can simply even just put up a picture of a nature scene in your house and look at it, and your blood pressure is going to go down. And we do see the nervous system shift. We do see immune cells shift. And that is because we're tapping into even this sort of deeper programming of our instinctual knowing that nature is good for us. It's not a big aha thing. However, we need, okay, science. I need to see all these articles showing how much, points of blood pressure I can drop, or my immune system, or even blood sugar changes. And all that is a reflection that we're doing something good and getting outside in nature. So we have the green light or green that we see from nature, and also red light. Red is huge. And I know this biohacking world, there's red light therapies, all certain things which definitely work and are helpful. However, a free source of that is sunlight or sitting around a fire. Those are things that are available all the time. And why our biology responds to that is because that's what we had available and that's what we're around all the time. And our body learns from that. So getting into red light and infrared light as a way that stimulate our body's healing capacity. We have seen so many studies now on mitochondrial functioning improving, stem cell amplification. Our white blood cells or immune cells become more informed and are less likely to trigger that inflammatory response, but they become, let's say, more specific in their response, because we still need inflammation. It helps us, but we don't need this wildly out of control, crazy inflammation. And that's where, when these things run out of balance, that's when we start to see chronic disease and damage, and we need to focus on repair. So light is huge, and people may think of it as like kind of silly, or because we just don't notice it or feel it. Like if I drink a cup of coffee, I'm going to feel all the jitters. But in this way, that's why people go on vacation and they go to the beach and they get the sunlight and they say, wow, I need to go on a holiday and feel good. What do? You go and you get sunlight. I mean, of course you go and you think you associate, oh, the ocean's really nice, which has its own, capability of healing. But that's what people used to do in the old days when they were sick. They go sit outside, or they go to a solarium or a sanatorium, they were called. And Italy was very famous for this too, that they're like sun worshipers in this way, almost similar to like the Mayans and the Aztecs, that you are sick, go get more sunlight. Oh, because you've been inside too much, you have this cold, or it's raining or something, you don't feel good. Okay, where it's sunny, go there and dry. And this is part of when our body remembers and gets that information, it starts doing the right stuff. So our environment is huge, and light is a big part of that, how we can train and push our body
yeah, how
into
it
the
impacts
healing
the
response.
quality of our mitochondria, which is the root of all kind of metabolic disease here. So, green versus red, chlorophyll versus hemoglobin.
Right. Yeah, there's a really cool, connection there. And I have a picture in the book about those two differences, and it's really at the center is the difference between iron and magnesium. And that's very, very important, but it's also showing how much connected we are to the plant world, or the planet. Let's just say that we are doing things a little differently, but we still need the same things. The sunlight is a big source of energy for us. And people used to think, oh, well, we don't get energy from sunlight. And that's been totally debunked. We can get out in the sun, and your body requires less glucose, less intake of nutrition when the more sunlight you get, because our mitochondria work better and they're more efficient. And so we can pass electrons very easily through photons into our mitochondria. And like you mentioned before, I think it's very wise to say that it's not the sunlight causing damage to our skin. It's all the inflammatory components in our lifestyle. Big part of that are seed oils and artificial let's say, ingredients in our diet and chemicals in our water and food supply that react to create inflammation. And when sunlight interacts in that sort of pathway, that can create more inflammation. So it's not to say sunlight is damaging. It's damaging in the context of if we're in a toxic state versus a healthy state. And even still, I still tell people it's way better to get out in the sun than it is to worry about, oh, do I have inflammation? Is my skin going to get damaged? And there's a smart way to do it, like 15-20 minutes in the early morning, late afternoon, not in the midday sun, until your body builds up more of the melanin in the skin, the tan. And that's actually very protective. It's very protective for our nervous system. That's why, when we get tan, our body it's able to use it as more of a solar panel, and we use that energy more from sunlight, the more tan our skin is. So it's very important as a
So
protective.
when you're absolutely right, that's been debunked, and people don't realize just how integral light is to our existence. And when I ask patients all the time, where is the most dense source of magnesium? Where does magnesium come from? Most people aren't aware that it's from chlorophyll, from plants, right? The green. And we're almost, I haven't seen one individual in the last decade who's not magnesium deficient. Our nutrition, unfortunately, is also crippling our um, our health outcomes. But to
Right.
continue on this light bandwagon, obviously light increases blood oxygen, and for me, oxygen is the absence of disease. And so we definitely need to get more out in the sun. And it's interesting, as you alluded to, many of the benefits that are derived, and how we have weaned away from free sources of healing, right? When your book with Kurara, the
Right.
ability to heal, and God forbid we use the
Yeah.
term cure here, evolution of medicine,
I know.
we can heal, and we can use free sources of nature. You mentioned infrared. Now, are you suggesting artificial sources like these modern additions of red light beds or red light exposure, or how do you think in terms of that?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, infrared light is basically heat, right? So when we look at the spectrum of what light, that type of light, I mean, light is energy. So when we say light, we usually focus on what we can see with our eyes. And we have a spectrum of light that we can see is different than other animals and insects. And that's a energy spectrum. And when you go just below the red light spectrum of what we can see is the infrared. That's what's called just below red. And that's a sense of heat that we feel. And so heat has been used for applications for healing in many, many ways, from, putting hot stones on your body to just sitting in a sauna. And now we have this sort of modern technology where we can replicate that through infrared light or red and infrared saunas. Some people do okay with that, but not everybody. So how you can test that is just to sense, start slowly and move into 15-20 minutes getting around infrared light. Now, you can buy those light boxes and the light and infrared light. If we don't have access to easy way of doing that, I think using technology is a great step. However, like the old way we used to do is get into a sweat lodge, get into a Swedish sauna, sit around a fire, and that actually the light and the infrared light that comes off of that stimulates our body circulation. It stimulates the mitochondrial functioning and repair mechanisms. So when we're around warmth and heat for, a certain type of, point of time, maybe it's 20-30 minutes, that starts generating repair mechanisms. And there's a lot of science around that, a lot of athletes, and now we can kind of amp that up with technology. So I don't mind. I think that if people are looking for ways to heal, then those technologies are helpful. But let's just say there's old and easy ways of going about doing it, just from sitting around a fire, making a campfire. Even in the winter, it's snowing. Like I've done these sort of sweat lodges with Native Americans, and they're just building a fire, putting a bunch of stones on it, and sitting around it. Then they can move stones into like this tent or teepee, and you sit around. In the stones are glowing red hot, and there's something that happens in our body that says, ah, yeah, this feels good. And in that way, we know that we're on the right track. But everybody's a little different how they respond. And then, of course, when we get around heat and we're sweating, we're releasing toxins. So we have to be aware of our toxic burden and what we're capable of as far as their detox pathways being open and available. And so it ties into these practices that we can do and we have access to utilize in a, specific and health, intentional way that we can move our body to a better state. And some people I know that can hit an infrared sauna for 5 minutes and that's it. They're maxed out. So everyone has a different place where they're at, but using them, definitely we know our body responds to that type
It's
of
interesting because you referenced
energy or
Italy
light.
earlier, and I remember growing up, my father, anytime we were sick, he would say, "Go take a walk by the beach." What? And the reason being, I
Oh
understand
yeah.
now, is
Yeah.
because the high iodine content in the sea. And yes, iodine very supportive, protective of thyroid, but it is tremendously antimicrobial. And so there is so much innate
Yeah.
wisdom, right,
Well,
in just
100.
exposing yourself to the sun, to grounding or earthing, getting in the sea or in the ocean. When you mentioned, photons and
Yeah.
electrons, obviously looking at the electron transport chain and mitochondrial energy, et cetera. The more electrons we lose due to free radical damage, the more inflamed we are, the more toxic, the less our ability to heal. Excess protons is the root of inflammation. How do you quickly change that is go ground yourself. And how to supercharge that? Go into the sea or the
Yeah.
ocean. Right? Get your feet on
Yeah.
sand. It's interesting because you
Right.
mentioned that sand,
Yeah.
that was something novel. Sand reflects light 17%, or the ultraviolet rays from the sun, which is
Yeah.
so it's
Significantly more. Yeah. Yes. 100%. That's why I think what you're right on with what you were saying, that there's such healing benefits from going to the ocean, and I think most people sense that or feel that. And there was this ancient, not ancient, but cultural idea of like get out and walk by the beach, and iodine, the negative ions, the grounding, the reflection of the UV light, water in itself, movement, and the salt. So there's like a lot there that isn't like mind blowing, but when we put our body in that context, and let's say whether it's recovering from an illness or we have some chronic condition, that if we're able to put our body into that state more often, then we're tipping the scales in the direction of our health. Of course there might be other things you need to be doing, but in that way, when our body's in that environment, it's way easier to heal. And we have to realize that I think it's in contrast to most people living this modern lifestyle are not grounding every day. They live in this hermetically sealed box. There's not fresh air flowing. We don't get good oxygen. We have artificial lights. We have off gassing of products in our home. And so all these things are like when we take ourselves out of that context and put it into the beach and ocean context, our body's like, thank you. You finally realized to get us out of this thing. And it doesn't mean we can't live that way. We just have to be really aware that if we set it up properly, we can live a healthy lifestyle. And that's really important. There are invisible forces at work in this container of our environment that could be working against us, no matter how much you're working on your gut health or eating an amazing diet or taking supplements. If we're still not able to feel really good, then let's start to look at these bigger macro concepts on, and that's kind of what's laid out in the book, from the light, those principles of how our mitochondrial function actually work best in these type of environments. And then we can start to work with those things with that inflammation. And I don't know how you feel about blue light, but this is a huge another sort of avenue of health that we are starting to realize is very, very important because of our, I guess we're inundated by technology, our screens, television, and everyone has a device now they're looking at all the time. So that's for me, this two, like you brought up the light category, the main ones that I think I love people to learn about is sunlight, how important it is, the positive benefits of heat, infrared light, and healing, and the dangers of blue light. Because I think those, if you can get those concepts, then we're going to be in a way better health state. And those are things you can do and work with, and it's not like inaccessible at all. What's your thoughts about blue
That's
light, and what do you
exactly what was
recommend
on
for
my
your
mind, where I was
patients?
going to ask you the same question. Thoughts are simple. The science is unequivocal. Blue light can damage retinal cells. We never evolved with this artificial light. It has become to our detriment. When the electric bulb was invented, so that we can um, stay more productive into the deep
Yeah,
hours of night, it comes at a consequence of our health, and we've seen that over time. It's interesting because when you speak about this in your book, the importance of darkness, I thought that is so elegant because we're designed to live in conjunction with the cycle
Yeah.
of the sun and the moon. And so I always tell my patients,
Mm.
nothing good happens after sunset. Now, for adults, we like to,
Maybe
but
some things
beyond that,
good
we
could
were not
happen, but
designed to stay
you
awake.
know,
But blue light suppresses melatonin. We see
right.
that. We see health outcomes only deteriorate.
Yeah.
And so the goal, I don't even think you can source incandescent light bulbs here in the US anymore. I think they've been banned to some big.
Well, they were banned and then I think they've been unbanned. So, but still the I guess the industry moved to, more LEDs and fluorescent lights, which is like, I know it might sound crazy to some people, probably people who are watching this podcast, they're already hit to a lot of these things that whatever is generally recommended, try to do the opposite. But in this way, like the light, even though we're saving energy, from having a LED or a fluorescent light bulb, it's actually way more damaging for our health. So going back to incandescent is great. That's what I have here in the house in Costa Rica. And I even put in the red light bulbs. I put in ways that don't mess up my circadian biology. So there's a number of things. One is when you have an incandescent light bulb, like you mentioned, sure, if it's on in the late hours of night, it is producing brighter light than our eyes used to. So it's messing up our circadian rhythm and our melatonin. But it's way better choice than others, and you can dim them. What's coming off of the incandescent light bulb is also heat. So we're getting infrared light from that, which is better than the high spectrum blue lights that come out of the LED lights. And those, for sure, there's two things wrong with the LED lights is that they have a flicker response. And the flicker is like a sub-perceptual flicker, but our brain picks up the flicker and it can influence our state of brain waves to be more in the fight or flight response. So there's a flicker response that we have to be aware of, and the amount of blue light is not conducive to health because blue light is kind of rare in nature. That's how our body responded to have these kind of receptors to blue light because it stimulates dopamine and it is very activating, it suppresses melatonin. So when we're around it all the time, our body gets way out of balance, doesn't know when it should be secreting hormones, doesn't know when is day and when is night. So these are, besides the hormone picture, there's actually a dopamine picture, and that is known through the people who develop apps and technology that we can get and grab your attention more through the bright lights, the flashing colors, and the high blue light frequencies. And actually, what happens, part of our frontal lobe brain shuts down to where we don't process things as well. We're just in this sort of, imagine eating a big Thanksgiving dinner and you're in this coma state. You're like, oh, that feels so good. I just ate a lot of food. That's the huge dopamine serotonin response. That's what blue light's doing to us all the time. And then we get burnt out. And then we feel like when we turn it off, we feel uneasy. It's kind of like a withdrawal. So this is really, really important for us to have intelligent ways to work with our technology. And the simple things that I do is just put on the blue light blocking glasses. I put filters on my screens. I change my light bulbs. It's not like I'm living in a cave. We don't need to do that, although some people might want to. But we can interface with technology in a better way. It just starts from being aware of the dangers that are out there. And it does negatively influence our health
Yeah, here
in so
I
many
quote your book,
ways.
greater nightlight exposure associated with increased risk of major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, PTSD, psychosis, bipolar disorder, self-harm. So my philosophy is very simple. We are no longer living congruent with
Yeah.
our biology. And so I actually prefer to be in a cave at night. And the goal is that, well, the reason being is that
Yeah,
because I'm
that's
looking
exactly.
to sync my circadian rhythmicity. And as such, if I don't want to undermine people that are looking to obviously interface with technology in a healthy level. And sometimes, we do have to stay up for whatever reasons. But in looking in terms of our evolution of biology, that never really kind of happened. Yeah, we had fire, or eventually candle. Um, the goal is not
Right.
to
Yeah.
push back against evolution, but to maybe resync. And so when you said the blue light exposure and the dopamine serotonin, it is a cognitive hijack, and we see that with kids. It's immensely exacerbated, and so it's almost like you're
Yep.
scrolling, and then you need to
Yes.
scroll more. And it's not you craving it. All of a sudden, it's like the phone is calling you, feed me more. And it's becoming this addictive kind of society where we're constantly locked in. And what everyone is trying to
Right.
do now is disconnect, right? We're all the retreats that we spoke about
Right.
prior to the call. We're all looking to kind of unplug and disconnect because we realize that we are set up in this kind of toxic environment that was designed very, very intentionally to our detriment. Or I don't believe necessarily that things are
Yes.
designed with malice necessarily, but sometimes we don't realize the unintended consequences. And instead of adopting darkness as this is beneficial, we're like, no, I need to turn on the lights. I need to do more work. I need to scroll. I need to stay up later to get things
Yeah.
done. But again, it's only to our detriment,
Right.
unfortunately. And so my philosophy is identical in many respects as yours. It just, to me, when you said the importance of darkness, we don't think of it, right? And we're always pushing back on darkness, right? How much
Right.
longer can I stay up to be more efficient? Well, actually, not really. Production and performance has
Right.
upper limit and a threshold, right? So I appreciate you kind of very, very elegantly tying those knots. What's interesting further still
Oh
is,
yeah.
are we, I'm always look when I any decision I make, I ask myself a question like, is this in conjunction with our evolutionary biology? And often enough the answer is no. We're, as you said, we're going from one box in our car to another box to our office to another box back to our homes. Our windows are shut. The air is not is now that UWG came out with a study, the air is indoor air is somewhere between 2.5 to 5 times more toxic than outdoor air. We're not opening our windows. It's infecting our
Right.
breath, asthma, allergies
Yeah.
continuously on the rise. Our kids, worse still. And then obviously we're just bombarded with light, right? And then if we're sedentary, which we'll get into in a moment. But
Mm.
what's interesting in your book, the further
Yeah.
away you go from the equator, the further that we see this kind of seasonal affective disorder. My question is, while we are extremely resilient, right, we've been able to evolve and adapt, has that been necessarily, again, optimal, right? If you look at Nordic countries or when you're kind of in cold, and we were speaking offline about that in terms of nutrition philosophy is very simple, eat the seasons.
Hmm.
Avocados don't grow all year round here, but now because we can get them from Mexico, they certainly do. But what's interesting is we ban DDT here, but we export it to Mexico and then they spray it and now we're getting hit back anyways. So toxicity is full circle.
Yeah, they figure that
But
out. They figure out how to get around that
so you're
loophole.
living
But
by the
yeah, you're right.
equator.
You
Is that
100%.
kind of how
Yeah.
we were designed, even though we've been able to adapt?
Well, I think that humans are they're designed to adapt. However, if someone is in a health situation and they want to have less stressors on their body, then to live closer to the equator is a little more easier. And easier means that our body doesn't need to do so many things to stay in balance because there's less variance and seasonality and times of year with the light changes. So when you're around the equator, your body becomes more in sync with this rhythm. And it's not, when we have like daylight savings time or when you shift it during the seasons, people struggle. They really are like, oh, great, now I have to do this and I have to wake up at a different time. And that's because our body, what we're doing, it wants to keep doing. And that's like the laws of inertia. But if you're doing something that's healthy and working, then your body wants to keep doing that. So it becomes harder when we go to these higher latitudes where the seasonality is much more drastic. But what we've learned as a people over time is that we had a way of eating and living that was in sync with that still helped our biology and still was supportive of health. We just moved away from those practices like Nordic countries are one to look at because what they do is go into hot springs and then they go into sauna. And also there is this concept or the study on water, the type of water they're getting is quite different than in other places of the world. I don't know if you've heard of deuterium depleted water before
Hmm.
or deuterium related water. So in that way, in the higher latitudes, is actually in the mineral springs and in the water they're drinking has more deuterium depleted water, which has the type of it's really biologically, important to recognize that water is oxygen and hydrogens, and there's also these floating around different hydrogen ions that are can affect us the more or less that they are, and whether it supports and fuels our mitochondrial functioning. And as we keep going back to what we're learning is from a really deep biological perspective, it's all, how we stay healthy is really keyed into our mitochondrial health. And so the more things we do that support mitochondria, which is electrons flowing through and giving our body energy, then the more supported our overall health is. And so at the higher latitudes, the way to work with that is saunas, hot springs, and water, and even cold plunges is another one. They go from ice water to warm to hot and cold, and that supercharges our mitochondria because it starts to pump and move electrons in a different way. So we can definitely adapt. It's not a problem. But what you don't want to do is sit in a box with artificial light all day and then see the sun going down and keep going all through the night. And then you're not shutting the light down, or vice versa. In the summer, there's a lot of light in those higher latitudes, and people then are doing too many things. They're staying out too long. They're not sleeping right. You need to get blackout curtains or go into your cave and shut the door and know, like, all right, here's my hibernation time. I need to sleep at least a certain amount of hours in darkness, and as much complete darkness as you can, because our body will get into a deeper sleep and restorative sleep that way, for sure. So that's my sense and my belief in what we've seen cultures around the world thrive. And another key thing is our nutrition at those higher latitudes should change. We need to eat more fat and protein during the winter, and we're going to live off of fat, like the in Alaska, the Eskimos just eating pure whale blubber and seal meat, and even like in the Nordic countries, they ferment fish like in the ground and they eat that during the winter. Like, we're just eating the wrong things at the wrong time of year, and it pushes our body to be in the wrong metabolism. So that's why it doesn't feel good. And a lot of times people are just like, send me back. We were talking this before, go to Florida or go put me on a vacation to the Bahamas or somewhere, just when it's in the middle of the winter, because we want to, that's the way we were living from the summer. And then we didn't change. And even though the light changed and the season changed, we just want to keep going like it's summer. And that's not biologically
I was
supportive.
having this
Does
exact
that make sense?
conversation yesterday. The body upregulates salivary amylase in terms of fall harvest, right? When wheat is, we have this innate
Oh
design that we
yeah,
have now
yeah,
lost. And we are no longer eating the seasons, and we're no even longer eating fat, which is produced specific times of year, whether it's coconut or olive oil and fermented foods that you
right,
nailed it, which we usually can and we save for the winter time when nutrition there's nothing to hunt or
right.
food, or obviously produce is less prevalent. We are no longer living in
Mhm,
congruent again with our
right.
evolutionary biology. So there's this kind of mismatch, right? So bodies is constant guessing game. And so
Mhm,
it completely resonates.
right.
Unfortunately, it's interesting because when I go
Yeah.
to visit my family in Italy, I'll go into Sicily and I walk with my cousin, and he's pointing out all the herbs, and he's like, this is for a rash. This is for a burn. This is for infection. This is for mosquito. It's like, how do you know all this? And he looks at me, he's like, how do you not know all this? Nature is medicine, but we don't understand that
Yeah,
anymore. And the same principle is when I'm going to the
yeah,
markets in Italy, we're just buying local. My uncle is like, no, don't grab those peaches. It's actually not seasoned yet. Those are imported from Africa. The tomatoes aren't ready yet, so don't buy
right.
that. We'll buy that, in 2 weeks when those will be ripe. So they know intuitively when things are
Oh yeah,
harvested so that you're optimizing for nutrient content. We're eating like dead food that's on the back of a truck, hopefully that's not sprayed with too much organic
yeah,
pesticides that's allotted here in the US. And so
yeah,
we're only getting more sick. So 100%, I want to underscore water for a second further still.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned deuterium depleted water. So for people to understand, this is water with it's a heavier isotope of hydrogen. We're adding in hydrogen, like this hydrogenated water, all these kind of, I use an Echo Go. It's a tremendous selective antioxidant, tremendous
Sure.
benefits when you're adding that. I was sourcing
Yeah.
deuterium depleted water 10 years ago, before this was kind of understood. It was from
Oh yeah.
Romania,
There you go,
and
man.
paying
Yeah.
40 gallons,
Wow.
$40 for per gallon. Clearly, that's not sustainable. Okay. So I stopped. I was like, but the
No.
problem here is, what's the
Yeah.
alternative? So in the US, we have to have an RO, distilled dead water. We're drinking dead water. When I moved to Europe,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Yeah.
water from the tap that is very mineral rich. There is a beautiful taste profile, but it's also structure. The dead water that just sits here, it's not running over stone and collecting
Right.
minerals. So with like Gerald's
Yeah.
Pollock research and the fourth phase of water and the importance of restructuring water and how water can be
Hmm.
chaos versus
Hmm.
how we can absorb intracellular. When we drink this dead water, we're actually not hydrating unless you restructure, remineralize it. So all our patients, we suggest
Right.
a pinch of salt in the water. Or if you like, sometimes I'll leave it outside under the sun and I'll put in some rocks like shingite or some other
Yeah.
to remineralize. But people don't
Yeah. Yeah.
realize is that patients come all the time like, ah, man, I'm drinking a gallon a day, but I look at their cellular hydration and it's 50%, whereas I mean it should be somewhere close to two
Yeah.
thirds, which is the natural composition of our water. So it's not necessarily, people just don't understand. I
Hmm.
think is like, oh, there it's not for lack of effort. Sometimes it's just the misinformation that we don't understand. As you said before, we're trying to force things, right? It's just like, oh, I need to drink more water. Well, what's
Yeah.
the quality of the water that you're drinking first off? Oh, well, I need to eat, this.
Yeah.
Well, is it actually in season and in synchronicity with our biology? Likely, right?
Right. Yeah, this is definitely important. And this, to me, there's like these stages of awakening in our health that we start to realize we're feeling better. And I know I can feel better. So what are the, where are the points that I'm missing? And I can see, what makes like a really good practitioner is where we're at is to be able to see where the person is able to make that next step. And so if someone's not drinking any water, then okay, get yourself like water, just stop drinking coffee all day and like just go to get some water, like good water. Try not to get it from plastic bottles. Try to have some filter. Okay. Then you're making steps and you're like, yeah, I'm drinking water, but I still don't feel great. Okay. So here's the next level of like, where's your water coming from? How do we remineralize it? And then the concept of structured water is really like the pure water of how our body biologically can utilize actual H2O. And that's from the water being structured in a certain way that our body loves it and wants to absorb it. And so the Gerald Pollack's work, and there's many others that focus on the quality, the energy, or the structure of the water is how, like, what fuels our mitochondria, fuels nutrition delivery. And as you mentioned, there's studies about actually if you take your water in a glass and you put it onto basically you're putting it on out in the sun, then you're able to energize that water. And what they study, like from a pure physics and science standpoint, it's not like, oh, I'm just getting lovely sun energy. It's putting photons in the water and adding a layer of electron transport to the water that they can actually witness and observe under the microscope. So this is really like kind of sounds all crazy. It's like, whoa, well, that's what hippies and all these people used to do and put it under the moon or put it under the sun. And we know water is influenced that way. And you can have, I mean, we can go down a huge rabbit hole with water. And there's more and more people that are really interested in utilizing water for our health. And like you said, it's really important to know where your water is coming from and what's in the water. And if we can go back to like the old ways, especially in Europe, they have like sacred water sources. They know like from this spring, like this person got healed, or go to this spring water if you're feeling tired and you need more energy. And the water coming out of the earth with the stones and minerals and it being structured has a quality that's very, very healing. So on a very simple level, if we just even decide, I don't want to invest in anything, then investing in understanding how water affects your body is like gonna
I
be a
went to the
huge
one of
game
those
changer
places,
for a lot
one
of people.
like a, as you said before, a sanatorium, but where they have these healing water places in Montecatini, and so it's
Yeah.
genuinely it,
Oh yeah, and we have them in the United States. If you go back and look at, and I'm really interested in history, and I lived in Virginia, New Jersey, Pennsylvania for a while. There are these retreats that our forefathers, or let's say Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, would go to just for the water. And there's a place called Jefferson Hot Springs, and there's in West Virginia and Virginia, and along the corridor where there's hot springs where you can bathe in and then get mineral water, that they were tapped in when they weren't feeling good or they know they needed to heal or at least get into a better state of mind. They would go to these places. And our Native Americans know these places, and animals go to these places. So we know that there's something to it, and it does turn on that sort of original biology and our innate healing mechanism. So I would say just people to try that, because I love, when I first got into this, I would just be experimenting and saying, how do I feel when I do this? how do I get access to it? So let's try drinking different water from around the world and see how you feel with it. And just, yeah, some things cost money, but also traveling and getting that experience of what our ancestors did and just exploring different places from a health standpoint, how you feel is
Again,
really
you nail it on
important
the head. I
to
think the
experience that.
openness to receive, to listen to our intuitive nature, right? When you go to the grocery store, instead of having a list, maybe seeing, okay, this is
Yeah.
what is attracting to me, like whether it's a specific produce, a vegetable, or a fruit, or meat, fish, it's whatever the case, right? Instead of identifying with societal norms, say, I got to eat at 9 and then at 12 and then at 5, because those are my lunch hours and dinner hours.
Yeah.
The body wasn't designed. Yes, we do enjoy regularity. I think the body responds well to that. And so when you said living closer to the equator, there's less variance, and so the body can harmonize. But in terms of just like we're just eating because that's the time of the day that we said we got to eat, rather than am I even hungry? Listening to your internal cues. Do I feel inflamed? Do I need to take
Right.
a nap? Do I need to rest more?
Yeah.
Instead, in our modern era, it's just we're running on empty. And what do? We press even further. Well, how? Well, you caffeinate, or we need to take some sort of
Right.
stimulant, or we need to then take some sort of anxiety med or depressive med because we aren't sleeping properly. Because we haven't had the light exposure to synchronize
Hmm.
our circadian rhythms such that we go to bed on time. And so the melatonin can kind of kick in when cortisol decreases into the evening. So it's interesting that we've hit on some topics I didn't plan to discuss. I wanted to highlight some other things in your book with the small amount of time we do have left here. Movement and sound. Perhaps
Sure.
let's
Yeah.
start with
Definitely.
sound, because I think that is something so powerful. When I go into some of these like sound retreats, it is remarkable how well you can feel and how quickly you can shift your physiological state. That,
Yeah.
especially in conjunction with breath work. And I was speaking about this on a podcast the other day, and we breathe about 10,000 liters of oxygen per day. That equates to about 30 pounds of oxygen. That's more than you can eat in a week. People don't realize the impact of healthy breathing, what it
Yeah.
can do to move lymph, to help with detoxification, to respire
Yeah.
some of the fat that toxicity that's accumulated. But in terms, well, maybe if you want to open up the that rabbit hole with breath or movement, sound, anything that kind of jumps out first.
Yeah, I mean, so these are, like I mentioned, that these are practices and ways you can use what we already have available to shift into a healing state. And this can be synergistic with other things you're doing. So if we're looking to tap into our biology, how our health really is meant to live from, then using these things as a source of healing is super important. Like you mentioned, the breath, I love to be able to just encourage people to stop, take a deep breath, see how you feel. Also, pay attention to where you're breathing during the day. Do we breathe through the nose versus breathe through the mouth? And start to shift your intention with your breath. It starts shifting, not only oxygen, because oxygen is a big part of why we breathe, but it is so deeply connected to our nervous system and this sort of fight or flight response that so many of us are in day to day. So if we want to shift that, or if we know we're doing something that's stressful, then what do? Stop, take a deep breath, close your eyes, just feel it in your body that your nervous system changes and hormones change, and our body ability to use the oxygen improves by so much. So there's so many breathing techniques out there. There's different types of breath work, which I go over in my book, from ways that you can really, support your nervous system, dopamine response, serotonin, better for mental health, all the way to just helping and supporting your mitochondria. So that's a key area. It's free. You just got to learn how to do it and do it in a safe and trusted way. So tapping into that, there's the sound and frequency, which is another really important one. And many people just like whatever. I just listen to a song because I feel good. I'm in a bad mood. I want to lift my mood. So on one level, music can do that, and our brains are kind of tapped into the ability to use sound and music to change the frequency of our own brain waves, to even these sound baths, and an idea that the vibration itself coming from certain sounds or music or singing bowls or crystal bowls, or even bird song and nature sounds like running water, they turn on our nervous system to be in the healing mode, and then a lot of things happen. Plus, deeper down is vibration and frequency that comes off of that is information our body is receiving. And that can change cellular response pathways, inflammation response pathways. There's a new type of medicine, that's been going, I guess, getting more popularized called frequency specific microcurrents. And this is another way that we're using frequency, even though we can't hear there are sounds that turn on certain mechanisms or turn off mechanisms in our body. And this is old kind of information we know was out there. People would go to, churches, and you hear this. I mentioned the Gregorian chants in one way, because if you're in a church, the churches are designed to amplify sound in a healing way, even though we might not realize that. Like, go to a really, really old church in Europe somewhere, and just look at this amazing structure. It's designed to put us into a healing state, which when we're in that state, we have a deeper connection to either our spiritual selves or a higher level of consciousness. And that's a place where we get information and we heal from. So sound is another super important one. There's many ways of working with sound, from binaural beats to just listening to music. And they've done studies on dementia. And if people listen to music from when they were younger, they actually have a better memory of the present. So this is tying into just some of the principles in free medicine that we have
I mean,
around us that
Holger
we can
Clark
tap
was one who
into.
popularized frequency medicine and how organs operate at a frequency, but so too do pathogens. And you can tap into frequency
Oh, yeah.
to electrocute, if you will, pathogens using frequency medicines. There's so much innate wisdom that we've
Right.
lost because modern society says we need to take a pill for every ill. So who's really running the show, right? Just I
Right.
always suggest just ask questions, and the person who asks the better questions finds better answers, right? We don't have to force things, as you so elegantly alluded to early on. I think we're trying to force
Right.
too much all at once as well, even in terms of healing too. When patients are sick, is obviously we want to get better faster, and we
Mm.
can do that when you shift your environment. Right. What is the context of your environment? Are you grounding earthing? That's free. Are you getting adequate sun? That's free. Are you listening
Right.
to healing vibrations and sounds? That's free. Like, have a healthy community. It's interesting because
Right.
I didn't make really that connection with church. There's always music, right? With sing and dance, and so
Yeah.
in any sort of dogma there. Like, it's very
Uh-huh.
euphoric in a context, very
Yeah.
healing. So
Right.
it's beautiful how you
Yeah.
connect those dots. And then in terms of movement, I find movement is medicine. The body was designed to move. It's interesting when they examined the life of indigenous tribes, such in the Hadza in Tanzania, and they're more sedentary than we are. But the biggest difference was it's these micro movements,
Mm.
right? So even though they're seated most of the day, they're crawling, they're crouching, they're huddling over, they're foraging. They have these little bouts of micro movements versus
Yeah.
us, we're just sat and period under the
Right.
artificial light
Yeah.
in our box
Yeah.
without healthy air, drinking from a plastic bottle, and we wonder why disease is on the right, and we're in an inflection point where our kids are going to outlive us. Hopefully, maybe not. I don't know, but needless to say, it's a problem. And what I really appreciate what you highlighted very, very beautifully in your book is just ancient wisdom, going back to our roots. Nature heals. My philosophy is if nature made it, it's okay. If man made it, stay away. And there's a caveat to that, right? Like,
Yeah.
technology has evolved, our hygiene practices
Yeah,
evolved,
of
which
course.
helped us to live longer lives. I don't know that it's healthier always, right? We can see chronic disease on the rise, right? We see
Yeah.
these ADD,
Yeah.
ADHD, neurodivergence, all these things, cancer, heart attack, all these things that really didn't exist, 100, 150 years ago were null and void, but now all of a sudden quite a prevalence. Are we testing more? Yes, certainly. But I mean, before smoking, lung cancer didn't even exist. It was an anomaly. So the gene somatic theory of cancer no longer is true. It's a metabolic issue. Our genes haven't been able to keep up with our modern
Right.
environment. That's the thing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is just, it keeps harping on this concept that it shouldn't be that difficult to be healthy, because we just moved away from our original design in our biology. And this is kind of like why I say in my book is ancient secrets to awaken our innate healing capability or ability. It's because we have it already there, and we kind of forgot about it. Maybe cultures and other places still have this, and we're remembering right now, we're reconnecting with this information. And I want to remind people that it's not that hard. We just got to start to live it and feel it in our body. And it does require effort, and it requires us to be open to new possibilities and being able to make changes that may seem uncomfortable or difficult, or you might seem like a weirdo if you're, around in your house, you're taking all the light bulbs out and making changes. It's okay. When you start to feel better, you'll shine that out to your neighbors and to your community. And they're going to ask you, what are you doing differently? Like, how did why are you smiling so much? And this is just because you're tapping into your original biology. And like I said, I feel it for myself is that it keeps getting better and better the more we're on this search and on this journey in health. And that's what it's important for my message and for me to have patients that I work with, that it's not just like you say, take a pill for every ill or every problem we have, that we're educating and we're getting people to experience health as we're designed to experience it. And that's very, very important. And we're lost that in our modern medicine. I'm trying to help, like you, to bring that back to everybody,
And
into our
that
everyday
is the
medicine.
foundation of everyday medicine, right? I think it's just the premise is living with intent and being intentional with your decision. And through that, you'll find purpose. I had a patient really quickly came yesterday and he was asking, how can I make healthier choices for nutrition? Right? He's like, I'm a foodie and I love to eat, super sick, super toxic. How can I help me eat better? And
Uh,
my goal is to just provide education and guide the patient. Okay. We are not what we eat. We are what we digest, absorb, assimilate, and then eliminate. Like there's more to the puzzle. We're more gut bacteria than we are human. So goal is how I frame it
yeah,
is this food going to heal you or hurt you? There's nothing in between to me, right? So is your decision healing you or is hurting you? And be intentional. No one's perfect. Pursue progress, right? My goal is 1% better every single day. Over time, that compounds. It's like James Clear Atomic Habits, little wins, make it very achievable, digestible, and that compounds. And that's the way is for me is just reframe someone's paradigm to be intentional with their choices. And I love what you're putting together. I want to bring that to light very quickly here as we approach on time. You put together a retreat where people can reconnect, where you're connecting the
right.
dots with movement and sound and breath, and just back in tune with nature, right?
Correct. Yeah, I have a retreat planned for next year, 2026 in May. And this is really about living and experiencing these principles in a healthy environment here in Costa Rica, near the ocean, where nature is very vibrant and healing. When we get together as a community, as a group of people that with this intention that we want to experience our true health and our biology, then our body's going to remember that more when we, let's say, go back home and keep these practices in mind. At least we have the somatic feeling of how much these things have helped us that we can tap into as a resource. So my goal is a 1 week retreat where we practice these things. We talk about why these principles are healthy, and you get to experience some of the things that we talk about in my book, from light, from movement, sound, breath, and community and purpose, in a way that our bodies are designed to live and heal. And during that week, it's just about testing and experimenting with ourselves, and you our freedom to do whatever you want and join in or not join in on things. And that's my intention, is to get people to experience it instead of talking about it so much. Feel it in your body, and then you decide what
East
works
meets
for you.
West. You guys heard it here first. Michael Blahut, this has
There
been
you
a
go.
genuine pleasure. You are a wealth of ancient wisdom that is just overlooked in this day and age, unfortunately. And so
I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Daniel. I really love talking with you and your outlook and perspective on health. I think we have a lot in common, and I hope to keep
I
in
told you,
connection and
I
collaborate with
hopefully
you in the
will be
future.
knocking on your door very soon in Costa Rica. So
Come and visit Costa Rica. Everyone is welcome, and I'm here. If anyone has questions, they can reach out to me. Also on my website, it's everyday-medicine.com. And I love just being able to connect to really good people and help answer questions when in
so I was going to
regards to
ask,
tap
where
into
can
our
people
real
follow
health.
you? Is the website the best to get in touch?
Website is good. I also have an Instagram and social media. It's Dr. Michael Blahut. Anywhere you can find that stuff. And my website is good. I try to get information and connect people that way. And if, yeah, they can reach out to me
Perhaps
through
you and
that
I will
way.
be running
Totally.
retreats together in the near future. So we share the same philosophy. I appreciate that. I appreciate your time today. Last
Sounds
question I end
good.
every episode with: if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good one. I think my superpower would be to have this is something I always wanted as a kid, is to just fly or go anywhere instantly that I think of. Because personally I love traveling, I love exploring the world, and I have all these ideas like I want to know what it's like here, I want to know what it's like there. So my goal, besides just like, the obvious like healing touch, everybody can be healed. I don't think that's as powerful as the experience for me to just go somewhere instantaneously by thought. And that's just because of my own curiosity. I want to know things. I want to learn things. I want to experience.
My answer was identical. You were like you were like a brother from another mother.
That's pretty funny. I got you. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, and that's why we're here. We're connecting and we're making, good vibes for everyone out there to just connect to this ancient and also new wisdom of our own healing potential. And that's our message. It sounds like we're
This
very
has
much
been
aligned in that way.
absolutely awesome. I appreciate it. I encourage everyone listening to read the book, follow you, and perhaps we'll see you guys soon on a retreat. Thank you.
That's right. Thank you so much. Be well.
Thank you for tuning in to the TBD Fit Podcast on Dr. Talks, where we unpack all things health and longevity. If you enjoy the show, like, review, and subscribe. This allows us to have a greater reach and help others on their health and wellness journey.